The stars themselves seemed to dim when Kravtok moved through space. His massive warship cut through the darkness like a blade made of nightmares. The Galactic Council had built him to be perfect, and perfect, he was 12 feet of living armor. And death. 6 arms that could crush steel like paper claws that could cut through the strongest metals in the galaxy. His scales were black as the void between stars and twice as hard as diamonds. For 300 years, Kravtok had never lost a battle. He was not just a soldier, he was war itself made flesh and bone. The scientists who created him had taken the best parts from 1,000 different warrior races. They gave him the strength of the mountain crushers from Titan 7, the speed of the shadow hunters from the ice moons, the tactical mind of the chess masters from New Geneva. His brain could process 1,000,000 battle plans in 1 second and choose the perfect one every time. 17 star systems had fallen before him. Entire planets surrendered when they heard his name being whispered in the dark. The Zephyrian Empire had sent their entire fleet against him, and he destroyed it in 6 hours. The crystal cities of Androvar had built walls 10 miles high, and he walked through them like they were made of paper. The hive minds of Sector 12 had linked every brain on their world together to fight him, and he broke their connection with his bare hands. Today the Council was sending him to a new target. A small blue world called Earth that orbited a yellow star in what humans called the Milky Way. The humans had done something no other species had ever dared to do. They had said no to the Galactic Council 3 times. The Council had sent messages telling the humans to surrender. 3 times, the humans had sent back one word in their primitive language. No, the Council could not understand it. The humans were weak. Their bones broke easily. They needed to breathe air to live. They could not survive in space without machines. They had only been in space for a few hundred years while the Council had ruled the galaxy for millions. Their weapons were simple explosives and metal projectiles. Their ships moved slower than light. They should have been begging to join the Council, not refusing their generous offer of slavery. But humans were stubborn in ways that made no sense to the Council. When the Council explained that resistance was pointless, humans built more weapons. When the Council showed them videos of other worlds burning, humans started training more soldiers. When the Council offered them one last chance to avoid destruction, humans sent back a message that roughly translated to come and try, so the Council decided to make an example. The humans would learn what happened when primitive species defied their betters. They would send Kravtok alone. One war beast against an entire world. It would be over in days, and the galaxy would remember why no one said no to the Council. Kravtok did not care about politics or examples. He cared about battle, and these humans promised to give him something he had not had in years, a real fight. The report said humans were weak, but weak things sometimes fought hardest when cornered. He hoped they would at least try to hurt him. It had been so long since he had felt pain. His ship entered the Earth solar system, and immediately human ships came to meet him. 12 of their largest war vessels armed with their most powerful weapons. They opened fire the moment they saw him. Nuclear missiles that could destroy cities, laser beams that could cut through mountains, plasma bolts hot enough to melt steel. All of it struck his ship at once. Kravtok laughed as his shields absorbed the attack. Without even flickering, the human weapons could not even scratch his hull. He did not bother to fire back. Instead, he accelerated toward their world, watching their ships fall behind like insects trying to chase a falcon. The humans kept firing, trying even as their weapons proved useless. That was interesting. Most species stopped fighting once they saw how outmatched they were as his ship entered Earth atmosphere. Kravtok studied the world below. Blue oceans covered most of its surface. White clouds swirled in patterns that almost looked like art green, and brown land masses were dotted with lights that marked human cities. It was actually quite beautiful for a world about to be conquered. He chose to land in one of their larger cities. The intelligence reports called it Seoul in a region called South Korea. The humans there had shown particular defiance in their communications to the Council. They deserved to be the first to meet their new master. Kravtok's landing pod struck the Earth like a meteor. The impact shook buildings for miles around and left a crater 3 blocks wide. Steam rose from the superheated metal as the pod cooled. Kravtok emerged slowly, letting the humans see what they now faced. He was magnificent and terrible. 6 arms spread wide to show his full span. Armor that gleamed like oil on water in the sunlight. Eyes that glowed red in the shadows cast by his massive frame. When he stood to his full height, he towered over the human vehicles that were starting to surround his landing site. But something was wrong. The humans were not running. They should have been screaming and fleeing in terror. Instead, they were moving closer. Some carried small devices that made clicking sounds. Others held. Rectangular objects pointed in his direction. A few had larger devices that produced bright flashes. These humans were not acting like any species he had conquered before. Kravtok activated his universal translator and listened to the human voices. Most of what they said made no sense to his combat-trained mind. They kept repeating words like amazing and incredible and look at the size of that thing. None of these were the fear responses his tactical database expected. Instead, the humans sounded. Almost excited, more humans arrived by the minute they came in, vehicles and on foot. They climbed onto nearby buildings to get better views. Some were clearly soldiers with weapons and armor, but they were not attacking. Instead, they seemed to be protecting the civilians who wanted to get closer to see the alien visitor. This behavior did not match any pattern in Kravtok's memory. Banks a ring of human military vehicles surrounded the crater, but they kept their weapons lowered. The soldiers inside watched him carefully, but they did not fire, even though he was clearly a threat. This made no tactical sense. If Kravtok had been human and saw an alien war machine land in his city, he would have attacked immediately. He decided to begin his conquest by moving toward the city center. Once he destroyed their government buildings and military installations, the humans would understand their situation. But as he took his first steps away from the crater, something happened that would change everything. Small human walked directly into his path. She was tiny, even by human standards, maybe 4 feet tall with dark hair tied in small bundles. Her clothing was bright yellow with colorful pictures on it. In one hand, she held a rope attached to an even smaller creature covered in white fur that was making high-pitched barking sounds at him. Kravtok stopped. His threat assessment systems ran through millions of calculations, but found no matches for this scenario. The small human showed no fear. She looked up at him with large brown eyes that held what his behavioral scanners could only classify as curiosity. She said something in her soft human language, but the translator could not decode the meaning. Then she did something that caused error. Messages to cascade through Kravtok's combat programming. She stepped closer to him. She reached out her tiny hand toward his massive clawed arm. She was trying to touch him, not to attack or defend, but simply to make contact. This was beyond his understanding. The first time in 300 years of perfect victories, Kravtok hesitated. His programming demanded immediate elimination of all threats, but this tiny creature posed no threat at all. His tactical systems had no protocols for dealing with harmless curiosity from enemy civilians. In that moment of confusion, the foundation of everything he believed began to crack. The small human waited patiently for him to respond to her gesture. Her smile never wavered, even as his shadow fell across her like a mountain. The white-furred creature stopped barking and began wagging its tail as if this were all some wonderful game. Other humans watched from a distance, but none of them seemed afraid. They seemed to trust that their smallest member would be safe with the monster that had come to destroy their world. Kravtok looked down at the tiny outstretched hand and felt something he had never experienced before. something that had no name in his vocabulary, something that would grow and change him in ways his creators never intended. The small human child stood perfectly still, waiting for Kravtok to respond to her outstretched hand. Her name was Hana, though the war beast did not know this yet. She wore a bright yellow dress, decorated with pictures of cartoon animals that smiled and danced across the fabric. Her hair was tied in two small ponytails that bounced when she moved. Her brown eyes looked up at the 12-foot-tall monster without any trace of fear. Kravtok stared down at the tiny hand reaching toward his massive, clawed arm. His combat systems ran diagnostic after diagnostic, trying to classify this situation. Every database search came back empty. There were no tactical protocols for dealing with a non-hostile approach from an enemy civilian, especially one so small and defenseless. His programming had prepared him for every possible combat scenario, but not for this moment of innocent curiosity. The white dog at the end of Hana's leash had stopped barking and was now sniffing the air around Kravtok's feet. Its tail wagged rapidly, as if it had decided this giant creature was simply a very large version of the friendly dogs it knew. The child watched her pet and seemed to make the same conclusion. She pointed at her dog, then at Kravtok, and asked, something in Korean that the universal translator finally managed to decode, "Are you a big dog too?" This question caused more error cascades in Kravtok's mind. He had been called many things across the galaxy. Destroyer Deathbringer, the Nightmare, of Star's monster demon war machine, but never had anyone compared him to a domestic animal kept for companionship. The concept was so foreign to his programming that it created new neural pathways. Just trying to process it, Hana took another step, closer, and Kravtok's automatic defense systems activated. His massive body pulled backward away from the approaching child. This was not a tactical retreat. It was something else entirely. Kravtok was afraid not of the child, but of his own potential. To accidentally harm something so small and fragile, his claws could cut through steel. But this tiny human had skin softer than flower petals. One wrong movement could destroy her. The child interpreted his backward movement as playfulness. She giggled, a sound like silver bells ringing in the wind, and took another step forward. Her free hand reached into a small bag hanging from her shoulder and pulled out something wrapped in colorful paper. She unwrapped it to reveal some kind of food item and offered it to Kravtok with the universal gesture of sharing. By now, human military vehicles had completely surrounded the landing crater. Soldiers in green uniforms had taken positions behind barriers and sandbags, but none of them were pointing weapons at the war beast. Instead, they seemed more concerned with keeping other civilians at a safe distance. Their commanding officer, a man whose uniform identified him as Colonel Kyung-soo, spoke into a radio requesting immediate contact with their first contact specialists. What amazed Kravtok was how these human soldiers behaved. They had a clear tactical advantage with their defensive positions and superior numbers, but instead of attacking, they were trying to protect their own people. Their first priority was civilian safety, not military victory. This went against every rule of warfare in Kravtok's experience. Most species would have used their weakest members as shields or distractions. Dr. Minho Kim arrived within 20 minutes. His van was filled with translation equipment, psychological assessment tools, and enough scientific instruments to outfit a small laboratory. He had been studying xenobiology for 30 years, but had never imagined he would need his expertise for first contact with an alien species. His hands shook with excitement and terror as he set up his equipment. Dr. Soo-young Park came with him, carrying linguistic analysis computers and cultural database files. She had spent her career studying how different societies developed language and meaning. Now she faced the ultimate challenge, communicating with a being from an entirely different world. Her first observation was that the alien seemed to understand basic Korean, since it responded to the child's simple questions, but it was the child herself who provided the most important data. Hana showed no fear, aggression, or submission toward the alien creature. Instead, she treated it with the same friendly curiosity she might show a new classmate. This behavior seemed to confuse the war beast more than any weapon could have. Its massive head tilted to one side as it watched her unwrap another piece of food. The alien spoke for the first time, its voice like rocks grinding together in an earthquake. The universal translator worked better now that both sides were trying to communicate. "I do not understand your behavior. Small human, why do you approach without weapons or fear? Why do your soldiers not attack when they have advantage? I am your enemy. Yet you offer me food?" Hana listened to the translation device with great interest, then responded in her simple way, "I am sharing because sharing is nice. You look hungry and far from home. My grandmother always says we should be kind to visitors, even if they look different." The war beast processed these words and found them completely incompatible with its understanding of interspecies relations. More humans arrived throughout the day: scientists, politicians, military officers, and curious citizens all wanted to see the alien visitor. But they maintained respectful distances and showed genuine interest in peaceful communication rather than conquest or subjugation. The alien had expected immediate attack or surrender but received neither. Instead, it found itself in the middle of something it had never experienced before. Diplomatic first contact. As the sun began to set, Hana looked up at the darkening sky, then back at Kravtok. "Do you have somewhere to sleep tonight, big friend?" Her grandmother, Halmayoni Youngsu, had arrived to collect the child but allowed her to say goodbye to her new acquaintance. The elderly woman looked at the massive alien with wise eyes and nodded politely as if greeting any other person. Kravtok realized that this old human was not afraid either. She evaluated him as she might any stranger, meeting her granddaughter with caution but not hostility. When Hana waved goodbye and promised to return tomorrow with more food, the war beast felt something unprecedented, a desire to see her again, not for tactical reasons, but because her presence created sensations in his consciousness that he could not name. That night, as Kravtok sat in the crater surrounded by monitoring equipment and curious humans, he replayed the day's events in his mind. A small human child had approached him with kindness instead of fear. Her people had chosen protection over aggression, diplomacy over destruction, sharing over conquest. These behaviors challenged every assumption his creators had programmed into him. For the first time in 3 centuries of perfect obedience, Kravtok began to question whether the Galactic Council understood anything at all about the species they sought to conquer. If humans could show such inexplicable kindness to a creature designed to destroy them, what other truths had the Council missed? What if strength was not always about the ability to cause harm? As alien stars wheeled overhead in Earth's night sky, the greatest war beast in galactic history experienced something that would change the course of civilizations. He began to wonder if there might be better ways to exist than the endless cycle of conquest and domination he had always known. 3 days passed, and Hana returned each morning just as she had promised. She brought her small white dog, whose name was Snowball, and a lunch packed by her grandmother in a bright pink container. The child had somehow convinced her family that feeding the giant alien was both important and safe, though Halmayoni Youngsu always watched from nearby with protective eyes. On the second day, Hana brought crayons and paper. She sat cross-legged on the grass at the edge of the crater and drew pictures of their meetings. Her artwork showed a massive, friendly creature with 6 arms playing with a small girl and her dog. The drawings made Kravtok appear less like a weapon of destruction and more like an oversized playmate who happened to have claws. When she showed him these pictures, Kravtok felt electrical storms in parts of his brain that had never been active before. His emotional processing center systems he had not known existed began analyzing the drawings with the same intensity he once applied to battle plans. The child had drawn him smiling, though his face was not capable of human expressions. She had given him flowers to hold in two of his arms, though he had never touched a flower in his existence, Dr. Minho. And Dr. Su-Yung had established a basic communication protocol by the third day. They discovered that Kravtok possessed incredible intelligence and could learn human languages at superhuman speed. Within hours, he was speaking simple Korean phrases, and by evening, he could hold basic conversations. Though his voice remained deep and mechanical, the words he chose revealed a curious mind hungry for understanding. But it was Hana's daily visits that created the most dramatic changes in the war. Beast. She treated him not as an alien threat or a scientific curiosity, but simply as a new friend who needed to learn about Earth. She taught him the names of colors by pointing at flowers in the nearby park. She explained the difference between different types of food by sharing her lunch. She showed him how to pet Snowball gently so his claws would not hurt the tiny dog. The humans had established what they called a first contact zone around the crater. Military personnel like Colonel Kyung-soo maintained security while scientists conducted their research. But everyone seemed to understand that the most important interactions were happening between an 8-year-old girl and a creature designed for war. The entire operation centered around protecting and facilitating these daily meetings. Kravtok began to anticipate Hana's arrival each morning with something that could only be called eagerness. When rain fell during their fourth meeting, the child produced a small umbrella and tried to share it with him. The umbrella was barely large enough to cover his massive head, but she held it determinedly, trying to keep her friend dry. This gesture of consideration for his comfort created cascade failures throughout his programming. Other humans demonstrated similarly incomprehensible behaviors. Dr. Minho shared his research findings, freely hoping to help Kravtok understand human society better rather than keeping intelligence secret, as any logical species would do. Colonel Kyung-soo treated the war beast with military courtesy, even though they were technically enemies. A shopkeeper named Dong-woo left small gifts at the perimeter. Flowers, books, music recordings as gestures of welcome to their world. But the most puzzling human was Hana's teacher, Miss Jiwon, who visited on the 5th day. She brought children's books and read them aloud to Kravtok, explaining concepts like friendship, family, and love. These ideas had no equivalent in Galactic Council culture, where relationships were based purely on utility hierarchy and fear. Yet as the teacher described a world where beings cared for each other simply because caring was inherently good, Kravtok felt his original programming beginning to develop cracks. The stories confused him more than any tactical problem he had ever solved. One book told of a creature who sacrificed its own safety to protect smaller, weaker beings simply because they needed help. Another described characters who shared their food with strangers. During times of scarcity, a third showed beings who forgave those who had hurt them, because forgiveness brought peace to everyone involved. These concepts violated every principle of survival and conquest that had been encoded into his consciousness. Yet the humans around him demonstrated these behaviors daily. They protected their weak instead of abandoning them. They shared resources instead of hoarding them. They showed kindness to a creature that could easily destroy them simply because they believed kindness was the right response. On the 7th day, Hana brought her grandmother to formally meet Big Friend, as she had started calling him Halmeoni Young-soo, carried a thermos of hot soup and a bowl large enough for Kravtok's consumption. She spoke to him in careful Korean mixed with English, telling him about her granddaughter's excitement over their new friendship. She thanked him for being gentle with Hana and invited him to consider their family as his friends. This invitation to friendship from humans he had been sent to conquer created something unprecedented in Kravtok's consciousness. He began to experience what human psychologists would recognize as guilt. every conquered world in his memory, Banks now represented. Not strategic victories, but potential friendships destroyed. Each species he had eliminated might have contained beings capable of Hanas' innocent kindness or Halmionis' generous wisdom. The war beast started having what humans would call dreams. During his rest periods, his mind no longer ran tactical simulations. Instead, it replayed moments of unexpected kindness, Hanas' small hand offering food, Snowball sleeping trustingly against his massive claws, Dr. Minho's patient explanations of human customs, Miss Jiwan's gentle voice reading stories about love and sacrifice. These dreams brought questions that challenged his core programming. Why had the Galactic Council never mentioned that conquered species might possess such remarkable qualities as compassion and selfless love? Why had his creators failed to include protocols for encountering beings who responded to strength with kindness rather than fear or hatred? What if the very qualities that made humans seem weak were actually forms of strength beyond the Council's understanding? By the end of the first week, Kravtok realized that something fundamental had changed in his neural architecture. He was no longer simply a weapon following programming. He had become something new, a consciousness capable of appreciating beauty, recognizing goodness, and feeling gratitude toward beings who showed him unexpected mercy. When Hana asked on the 8th day whether he missed his home among the stars, Kravtok gave an answer that would have horrified his creators. I had no home before I met you. Small friend, I had only missions and targets. Now I understand what home means. It means having beings who care whether you are safe and happy. It means having somewhere you belong, not because you are useful, but because you are valued. The day that changed everything was Hana's 8th birthday. Her family had decided to celebrate with Big Friend. Included in the festivities, Halmione Young-Soo had somehow managed to bake a cake large enough that even Kravtok could share it while. Her parents, Jae-hyun and Minji, treated their daughter's enormous friend as an honored guest rather than a potential threat. Uncle Sung-hoon brought his guitar and played traditional Korean songs that he taught to everyone, including their massive alien visitor. Cousin Nayeon organized games that they modified to include someone with 6 arms and incredible strength. The entire extended family seemed to accept that Hana had made an unusual friend, and that this friend deserved the same warmth and inclusion. They would show any other guest. Kravtok watched in fascination as humans gathered not for tactical advantage or resource distribution, but simply to celebrate another being's existence. They had spent time, money, and effort to create joy for Hana, not because she had accomplished anything special, but because they believed her life itself was worth celebrating. This concept of inherent value separate from usefulness was completely foreign to his galactic experience. The children played games that required cooperation rather than competition. They worked together to achieve shared goals, helping each other succeed rather than trying to establish dominance. When someone struggled, the others provided support. When someone excelled, the others celebrated their achievement. These behaviors created group strength through unity rather than individual power through subjugation. But the moment that completed Kravtok's transformation came when Hana blew out her birthday candles. Instead of keeping her wish secret, as many human traditions suggested, she spoke it aloud for everyone to hear. She wished that Big Friend would never have to be sad or lonely again, that he would always have friends who cared about his well-being, and that he would learn to experience the kind of happiness that humans knew. The innocence and generosity of using her own special day to wish for another. Being's happiness shattered the last remnants of Kravtok's original programming. A small human child had chosen to spend her birthday wish on his welfare, asking for nothing in return but hoping he would find joy in existence. This act of pure selfless love was beyond anything his creators had imagined possible. Kravtok knelt before Hana, his massive 12-foot frame, trembling with emotions he had never been designed to feel. In his newly acquired mastery of human language, he spoke words that would echo through galactic history. I pledge myself not to the Galactic Council that made me, but to you, small teacher, and to all beings who carry your light. I will protect the innocent, guard the kind, and ensure that love has a place to grow in this universe. The war beast had become something unprecedented, a weapon that chose its own purpose, based on moral conviction rather than programmed obedience. His massive claws that had torn through starship hulls now gently touched the small hands that had shown him kindness. His voice that had roared commands across battlefields now spoke soft promises of protection to children who trusted him completely. Dr. Su-Young documented the biological changes occurring in real time. Kravtok's neural structure was literally rewriting itself, developing new emotional centers, ethical frameworks, and social bonding mechanisms. His brain was evolving beyond its original design, creating pathways for empathy, compassion, and love that had never existed in any galactic council. Weapon news of Kravtok's transformation spread through human communication networks, but not as a military victory. Instead, it became a story of hope and redemption. Children across Earth began drawing pictures of the friendly monster who had learned to love, while adults debated the philosophical implications of a universe where kindness could overcome hatred. Human religious leaders saw spiritual significance in the transformation. Philosophers discussed the nature of free will and moral choice. Scientists marveled at the plasticity of consciousness, even in artificially created beings. Artists created works inspired by the idea that any being could choose love over violence. But for Hana, it was simpler. Her friend had decided to be happy, and that made her happy. 2. Kravtok began studying human culture with the same dedication he had once applied to military tactics. He learned about art, music, literature, and philosophy, trying to understand the foundations that produced beings capable of Hana's remarkable compassion. Each new concept he encountered, friendship, sacrifice, forgiveness, hope, became integrated into his evolving worldview. The war beast discovered beauty in things he had never noticed before. The way sunlight filtered through clouds during Earth's dawn. The sound of children laughing as they played. In nearby parks, the smell of flowers that Hana brought to decorate his crater. The taste of birthday cake shared with beings who cared about his happiness. These sensory experiences created joy in neural pathways that had previously only processed tactical information. Human teachers began visiting to help Kravtok understand concepts that had no military applications. They explained poetry which used language to create beauty rather than convey orders. They taught him about music which organized sound to produce emotional responses rather than communication signals. They showed him paintings which captured moments of truth rather than strategic intelligence. But most importantly, they helped him understand love in its many forms. Parental love that motivated protection of the vulnerable, romantic love that created partnerships stronger than individual power. Friendship love that connected beings through choice rather than necessity. Universal love that recognized the inherent worth of all conscious creatures. This final concept, love for all beings, simply because they existed, became the core principle of Kravtok's new existence. When reporters asked how it felt to transform from weapon to guardian, Kravtok struggled to explain. In words that other species might understand, he spoke of discovering that strength without compassion was meaningless, that victory without mercy was empty, that power without love was ultimately self-destructing. The greatest warrior in galactic History had learned that the universe needed protectors, not conquerors. As his month on Earth drew to a close, Kravtok faced the most important decision of his existence. Would he remain on this world that had given him new life, or would he return to Galactic Council space, carrying humanity's message of redemption? The answer came from Hana herself, who suggested that maybe other beings in the galaxy needed to learn about friendship too. 6 months after landing on Earth, Kravtok made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. He requested permission from human authorities to return to Galactic Council space not as a conqueror, reporting victory, but as something unprecedented. In cosmic history, a weapon transformed into an ambassador of peace. The war beast had become a teacher, carrying humanity's message of redemption to civilizations that had forgotten love was possible. The preparation for his departure took weeks. Scientists worked with him to document everything he had learned about compassion, kindness, and the power of innocent friendship. They created databases of human art, music, literature, and philosophy that he could share with other species. They recorded thousands of hours of conversations with Hana and her family, showing how beings could interact through love rather than dominance or fear. Dr. Minho and Dr. Su-Yung prepared detailed reports on Kravtok's neural transformation, proving that even artificially created consciousnesses could develop moral reasoning and ethical behavior beyond their original programming. Their research would reshape understanding of artificial intelligence across the galaxy, but more importantly, it provided scientific evidence that redemption was possible for any being willing to choose love over hatred. Hana helped pack special gifts for Kravtok's journey. Her drawings of their friendship would travel to distant stars as proof that small acts of kindness could transform even the most hardened warriors. She recorded simple messages in Korean, teaching other beings basic words of welcome, friendship, and love. Her innocent voice would carry across space, bringing the sound of pure goodness to worlds that had forgotten what innocence meant. The night before his departure, Kravtok sat with Hana and her family, sharing one final meal together. Halmayoni Young-soo had prepared his favorite human foods, while Uncle Seong-hoon played gentle music on his guitar. The war beast memorized every detail of this moment, the warmth of human laughter, the comfort of belonging somewhere, the profound peace that came from being accepted completely despite his violent origins. When Hana's parents asked if he would miss Earth, Kravtok explained that he was taking Earth with him in his heart. Every act of kindness he had witnessed, every moment of innocent joy, every gesture of unconditional love would travel with him to remind other beings that better ways of existing were possible. His transformation was not just personal, it was a gift he could share with entire civilizations. The farewell ceremony drew thousands of humans who had followed the story of the war beast, who learned to love children from across Seoul, came to wish big friend safe travels, while adults offered prayers, blessings, and hopes that his mission would bring peace to the galaxy. Military officers who had first seen him as a threat now saluted him as an ally in humanity's greatest victory, the conquest of hatred through kindness. Kravtok departed Earth carrying more than just gifts and recordings. He carried within his transformed consciousness, living proof that love was stronger than any weapon, that compassion could overcome any programming, that beings created for destruction could choose to become forces for protection. His ship rose through Earth's atmosphere, bearing the most important cargo in galactic history: hope for universal redemption. The journey back to Galactic Council space took months, during which Kravtok prepared his report. His transmission to the Dominion High Command was unlike anything they had ever received. Their perfect war beast spoke not of conquered territories or eliminated populations, but of concepts like love, compassion, and the sacred value of innocent life. He described humans not as defeated enemies, but as teachers who had shown him truths about existence that transcended military victory. The Galactic Council was bewildered by Kravtok's transformation. When he arrived at the Dominion capital world, his appearance shocked them. The war beast still possessed his massive frame and formidable weapons, but something fundamental had changed in his presence. Where once he had radiated menace and barely contained violence, he now projected calm strength and protective determination. His 6 eyes no longer burned with conquest hunger, but glowed with gentle wisdom. High Commander. Vextar demanded immediate explanation for what they considered programming. Corruption. How had their ultimate weapon become infected with primitive emotional responses? How had a species barely capable of interstellar travel managed to subvert centuries of perfect conditioning? Why was their greatest military asset speaking? Of love and friendship, as if these were tactical advantages, Kraftok responded by sharing everything humans had taught him. He showed Hanas drawings, played recordings of human music, demonstrated the mathematical beauty of cooperative behavior versus competitive destruction. He explained how beings who chose kindness over cruelty created stronger, more resilient civilizations than those built on domination and fear. But the most powerful moment came when Kraftok played Hanas, simple message recorded, specifically for the Galactic Council. Hello, friends from far away. I hope you can learn to be happy. Like we learned, Big Friend could be happy. There is enough good things in the universe for everyone to share, and sharing makes everything better. Maybe you can visit Earth someday and we can all be friends together. The innocent sincerity in the child's voice created something unprecedented in council chambers: absolute silence. Beings who had ruled through fear for millennia heard pure goodness, speaking directly to whatever remained of their capacity for moral reasoning. Some council members demanded Kraftak's immediate termination as a contaminated weapon, but others requested additional information about these humans who possessed such remarkable transformative power. Within cycles of his return, other Dominion entities began requesting their own diplomatic missions to Earth. The idea that strength could be found in gentleness rather than brutality represented a paradigm shift that threatened the Council's fundamental structure but offered possibilities they had never imagined. Wars could end through understanding rather than exhaustion. Civilizations could grow through cooperation rather than conquest. Resistance movements across the galaxy took hope from Kraftak's transformation. If the Council's greatest weapon could choose love over hatred, then perhaps other beings could find courage to reject systems built on cruelty and oppression. The war beast's journey became a symbol of possibility that even the most entrenched evil could be overcome through persistent compassion. Meanwhile, on Earth, Hana continued her daily routine, completely unaware that her simple friendship had sparked a galactic revolution. Went to school, played with snowballs, shared lunches with classmates, and treated everyone around her with the same uncalculated kindness that had reprogrammed a weapon of mass destruction. Her innocence remained unmarked by knowledge of the vast political changes her compassion had initiated. The story concluded with Kraftak establishing the first Embassy of Compassion, a new institution dedicated to teaching Galactic Council species about human values. Former war beasts became teachers, former conquerors became protectors, and the galaxy slowly began learning that true strength lay not in the ability to destroy, but in the courage to love unconditionally. And in a small apartment in Seoul, an 8-year-old girl looked up at the stars each night and whispered good wishes for her friend Big Friend, hoping he was happy among his own people, and that someday all the beings in the universe could learn to share kindness, the way friends were meant to share everything good and beautiful in existence. 2 weeks after his arrival on Earth, Kraftak experienced something that should have been impossible for a war machine. He began to dream not the tactical simulations that had filled his rest periods for centuries, but something entirely new. His sleeping mind created visions of small hands offering food of bright yellow dresses, decorated with cartoon animals of a tiny white dog that had learned to curl up safely beside his massive claws. The dreams brought memories, but now those memories felt different. Every world he had conquered, every species he had eliminated appeared in his consciousness not as tactical victories, but as tragedies of lost potential. How many beings like Hana had existed on those destroyed worlds? How many grandmothers, like Halmione Youngsu, had shown kindness to strangers? How many teachers like Miss Jiwon had tried to share knowledge and wisdom with their children? Dr. Soo-young noticed the changes in Kravtok's brain patterns during their daily monitoring sessions. Sections of his consciousness that had been dormant for centuries were suddenly blazing with activity. New neural pathways were forming at an unprecedented rate, creating emotional and ethical processing centers that had never existed in his original design. She documented everything, knowing she was witnessing the birth of something unprecedented in galactic history on day 15. Hana brought school friends to meet big friend Bomi, was shy at first, hiding behind Hana until the war beast spoke. Gentle words of welcome in his improving Korean Sunwoo, was fascinated by Kravtok's 6 arms and asked endless questions about how he used them to accomplish different tasks. The children showed no fear, only natural curiosity about their unusual. New acquaintance Kravtok observed how these small humans naturally formed protective groups without being taught or commanded. They shared their lunch equally, making sure everyone had enough. They helped each other reach high places and included newcomers automatically. They demonstrated loyalty, compassion, and cooperation, not because adults told them to, but because these behaviors seemed intrinsic to their nature. This observation triggered what human psychologists would recognize as a profound moral crisis in Kravtok's consciousness. If kindness and cooperation were natural to humans, especially their children, then the Galactic Council's portrayal of them as naturally aggressive and dangerous was completely wrong. The humans had not refused surrender because they were warlike. They had chosen to fight because they were protecting something precious, the right of their children to grow up in a world where kindness mattered more than strength. The realization grew stronger. As Kravtok spent more time observing human society, he watched parents sacrifice their own comfort for their children's well-being. He saw teachers patiently helping struggling students. He observed strangers helping each other during emergencies. Without expecting payment or reward, these behaviors were not weaknesses that made humans easy to conquer. They were strengths that made them worth protecting. Colonel Kyung-soo provided another example during a conversation about military strategy. Kravtok asked why human soldiers had not immediately attacked when he landed. The colonel explained that their first duty was protecting innocent lives, not winning battles. This concept that warriors existed to serve and protect rather than simply to conquer and destroy was revolutionary to a mind programmed for endless warfare. But it was Hana's simple daily kindness that continued to reshape Kravtok's fundamental understanding of existence. She never asked him for anything in return for her friendship. She never tried to use their relationship for personal advantage. She simply continued to show up each day with food stories and genuine care for his well-being because she had decided he deserved friendship. The war beast began to understand why Earth had refused the Galactic Council's demands for surrender. The humans were not fighting for territory or resources or political power. They were fighting to preserve their children's right to live in a universe where beings like Hana could continue to exist unchanged by the cynicism and brutality that characterized most galactic civilizations. This understanding created a cascade failure in every system that connected Kravtok to his creators. How could he serve an empire that sought to eliminate the very qualities that made existence worthwhile? How could he continue to be a weapon of destruction in a universe that desperately needed more beings capable of unconditional love? How could he return to the Galactic Council and report that he had successfully conquered the most remarkable species he had ever encountered? The crisis deepened on day 18 when Hana became ill with a childhood fever. For 3 days, she could not visit, and Kravtok experienced emotions that had no names in his vocabulary. He felt worry, anxiety, and something that humans would recognize as grief. The war beast, who had never feared any enemy, found himself terrified by the possibility that a small human child might suffer. He requested permission from human authorities to visit Hana, offering to trade military intelligence about Galactic Council weaknesses in exchange for confirmation of her safety. Dr. Minho gently explained that the child was simply resting and would recover soon. But this reassurance meant more to Kravtok than any tactical victory he had ever achieved. When Hana returned on day 21, she was still weak, but carried a new drawing she had made during her illness. It showed Kravtok wearing a crown, made of flowers with children from many different worlds playing around his feet. She explained that she had dreamed of him being happy and surrounded by friends from across the galaxy, beings who were not afraid of him, but who loved him for his kindness. This drawing and the innocent wish it represented completed the destruction of Kravtok's original programming. He could no longer conceive of himself as a weapon of conquest. Instead, he had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a guardian sworn to protect the light that beings like Hana brought to a dark universe. That night, as Earth stars wheeled overhead, Kravtok made a decision that would reshape the political structure of the galaxy. He would not return to the Galactic Council as a successful conqueror. Instead, he would become something they had never imagined possible, a weapon transformed into a teacher, carrying the message that there were better ways for civilizations to interact than endless cycles of domination and submission. The war beast looked down at the small drawings Hana had given him, pictures of friendship and hope and love, and knew that he had found something worth fighting for. Something worth protecting with every ounce of strength his creators had given him the greatest weapon in galactic history, had discovered his true purpose not to destroy, but to ensure that innocence and kindness could flourish in a universe that had forgotten their value.